Eleanor Rivera sat alone at the corner of the dimly lit bar, her fingers circling the rim of an untouched glass of wine. 51 years of life weighed on her shoulders, though she wore it well, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp but tired. Nights like these had become routine, sitting, waiting, hoping for something to spark against the monotony of her days. She told herself she was just here to escape her empty apartment, but deep down she knew the truth. Loneliness had settled into her bones. The silence at home was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. The laughter of younger women drifted from a nearby table, high-pitched and easy. Elena's gaze lingered on them, a mixture of envy and resignation stirring inside her. She once had that same fire, nights where the world felt like it belonged to her. Now, she was simply watching it pass her by. A voice broke through her thoughts. "Mind if I sit?" She turned to see him, a man with an easy smile and eyes that studied her too carefully. He carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being noticed. His suit was tailored, his watch expensive, yet his presence felt less about wealth and more about control. Elena hesitated, then gestured toward the stool beside her. "It's a free country." He laughed lightly as he sat, signaling the bartender with a snap of his fingers. "Name's Damien." "Eleanor," she replied, her voice guarded. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of music and clinking glasses. Then Damien leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't belong here. Not with this crowd." She arched a brow. "And where do I belong exactly?" "With people who know how to appreciate a woman like you." His words slid out smooth, rehearsed yet effective. Something inside her stirred, a mixture of flattery and suspicion. She knew the type. Men who saw women like her as challenges, conquest to be won with polished lines. Yet there was something in the way he looked at her, as if he'd already chosen her. "Appreciation doesn't come cheap," she said, deflecting. "Good thing I'm not cheap," he countered with a grin. "In fact, I was about to leave this place. There's a yacht party tonight. Private, exclusive. You'd fit right in." Elena blinked, caught off guard. A yacht party? For someone like her? The thought was absurd. She was a school administrator, grounded in routine. The only boats she'd ever stepped on were tourist ferries. She shook her head, laughing softly. "I don't think so." Damien studied her, his smile never faltering. "Come on. One night. You deserve it. When was the last time you did something unexpected?" The question lingered. When was the last time? She thought of her nights filled with television reruns, her mornings with bitter coffee, her weekends with no one to call. Her life had become a carefully folded napkin, neat, predictable, lifeless. Her instinct whispered no. But another voice, louder and desperate, whispered yes. Damien touched her hand lightly, his voice a velvet trap. "You'll thank yourself later. Trust me." Elena swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't that woman anymore. But instead, she heard herself say, "All right, just for a little while." His smile widened, satisfied. "Perfect. You won't regret it." But as he rose and placed a hand on her back, guiding her toward the door, Eleanor felt a chill crawl across her skin. Somewhere deep within, a warning bell rang. She silenced it, convincing herself she was simply nervous. Outside, the night air wrapped around her like a shroud. The city lights blurred, the sound of the harbour faint in the distance. She told herself it was only one night. What harm could it do? She didn't know that this choice, this single yes, would unravel everything. The dock stretched out into the black water, its wooden planks slick with sea mist. Elena's heels clicked softly as she followed Damien, her nerves tightening with every step. Ahead, anchored like some gleaming beast, was the yacht,
its white hull glowing under the harbour lights. She had seen luxury before, but this was something else. The vessel rose several stories high, music pulsing faintly from within, the sound of laughter carrying across the night air. It looked like a floating palace, too extravagant for the likes of her. Damien glanced back, smiling at her hesitation. "Don't look so worried. It's just a party." She forced a breath. "Just a party," she repeated to herself, though the unease from earlier hadn't left her. A man in a pressed uniform helped her aboard, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Inside, the yacht bloomed with golden light. Crystal glasses clinked, chandeliers swayed gently with the motion of the sea, and bodies shimmered in expensive dresses and tailored suits. Elena paused, taking it in. Everyone here looked sculpted, curated, as if they had stepped out of a glossy magazine. She felt suddenly out of place in her simple black dress, like a trespasser in a world she didn't belong to. Damien leaned close. "Relax. They'll love you." But as he led her deeper into the crowd, she noticed the way some people's eyes lingered on her, too sharp, too assessing, like appraisers studying an object rather than a guest. She forced a smile, hiding the prickle of discomfort. "Damien!" A man's booming voice cut through the music. A tall figure approached, his hair slicked back, his grin all teeth. "You didn't tell me you were bringing company." Damien smirked, tightening his arm around Elena's waist. "This is Elena, a friend of mine." The man's gaze slid over her, deliberate, unsettling. "A friend," he repeated, before offering his hand. "Victor." His handshake was firm, his palm lingering longer than necessary. Eleanor pulled back politely, uneasy under the weight of his stare. More faces appeared. A woman in a red dress with diamond earrings leaned in close, whispering something into Damien's ear before looking Elena up and down with a smirk. Another man, older, with cold grey eyes, raised his glass in her direction without a word. They were all beautiful. They were all watching. Elena clung to her glass of champagne, sipping it faster than she meant to. The bubbles burned her throat, but she needed the courage. She tried to remind herself she was here to live, to break her routine, to feel something different. And yet, the longer she stayed, the more the glamour of the yacht felt like a mask, something dazzling enough to hide whatever lurked beneath. Damien was in his element, shaking hands, laughing, whispering inside jokes she couldn't understand. At times he seemed to forget she was even there. Eleanor wandered toward the railing for air, staring out at the dark water. Behind her, fragments of conversation drifted, words about shares, deals, indulgence. She caught only bits, but none of it sounded like small talk. A soft voice startled her. "Careful with Damien." Elena turned to find a woman beside her, no older than 30, her blonde hair falling in loose curls. Her eyes, however, held something tired, almost broken. "I'm sorry?" Elena asked. The woman's smile was thin. "He likes to collect guests. Just don't drink too much." Before Elena could respond, the woman slipped back into the crowd, vanishing like smoke. Elena's pulse quickened. She glanced at Damien across the deck, his laughter ringing out, his hand brushing another woman's arm casually. He looked carefree, but suddenly she saw him differently, not as the charming man from the bar, but as someone who belonged to this world of secrets and sharp smiles. Her unease deepened. She considered leaving, but Damien returned just then, pressing another glass into her hand. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his glass against hers. She forced a smile, her lips trembling slightly. "To new beginnings." As she drank, the champagne tasted bitterer than before. She didn't know it yet, but the first cracks in her night had already formed. Hairline fractures that would soon shatter into something far darker. The glasses never seemed to empty.
Every time Elena set hers down, another appeared in her hand, cold, glistening, filled to the brim. The champagne was crisp and sweet, but after her third glass, it began to blur the edges of her thoughts, softening the voices and laughter that swirled around her. Damien stayed close, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back, as though she were a trophy on display. He introduced her to more guests, their names sliding past her in a haze. Business partners, investors, friends who felt more like wolves circling prey. As the evening stretched on, Eleanor noticed the way Damien tightened his grip whenever another man's eyes lingered on her too long. His easy smile never faltered, but beneath it she felt a shift, something territorial, almost hostile. "Stay close," he whispered in her ear as they moved through the crowd. "This isn't the kind of party where you wander off." His tone was playful on the surface, but his eyes pinned her like a warning. Elena nodded, uneasy, though she still felt the flicker of excitement that had carried her onto the yacht. Maybe this is just how the rich behave, she told herself. Protective, confident. But then came the whispers. Standing near the bar, she caught snatches of conversation between two men in suits. "She'll do fine, as long as she doesn't ask questions. Damien always brings someone. He never changes." The words slipped through the hum of music like shards of glass. Eleanor glanced toward them, but the men turned away quickly, raising their glasses as if nothing had been said. She brushed it off, forcing a smile, when Damien returned with yet another drink. "For you," he said smoothly, though his eyes scanned the room, distracted. The champagne slid down her throat, heavier now. She felt the alcohol loosening her balance, the room tilting ever so slightly. "Elena." The voice was sharp, urgent. She turned to find the same blonde woman who had warned her earlier, standing close enough that her perfume filled the air. Her expression was tense, her smile fixed in place for anyone watching. "You need to be careful," the woman murmured, her lips barely moving. Eleanor frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I was you once." The woman's eyes flicked to Damien, then back. "And trust me, you don't want to be." Before Eleanor could press her, Damien reappeared, sliding his arm firmly around her waist. His smile was easy, but his grip was iron. "Making friends?" he asked lightly, though there was an edge in his tone. The blonde's smile didn't waver. "Always." She drifted away into the crowd as though nothing had passed between them. Damien tilted Elena's chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Careful who you listen to. Not everyone here is as they seem." His words lingered, heavy, almost rehearsed. Elena nodded quickly, brushing it off with a nervous laugh. She just seemed jealous. Damien's smile returned, but his eyes remained cold. "Exactly. Don't let it bother you." Still, as the night wore on, the laughter felt sharper, the stares heavier, the champagne stronger. Elena told herself she was imagining it, that she was simply unused to this kind of extravagance, but somewhere deep inside, unease gnawed at her. The whispers clung to her mind, refusing to fade. And as Damien guided her toward the stairs that led below deck, Elena realized the night was only just beginning. Damien's hand pressed gently against Elena's back as he steered her toward the staircase. The music upstairs still pulsed, muffled now by the walls, each beat growing fainter as they descended. The glow of chandeliers gave way to dimmer lights, a softer hum of machinery vibrating beneath the yacht's surface. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her voice light but uncertain. Damien glanced at her, his smile unfaltering. "Someplace quieter. You'll like it." The air grew cooler below deck, tinged with salt, and something metallic she couldn't quite place. Eleanor's heels clicked against the narrow passageway, her eyes adjusting to the subdued lighting. The glamour of the upper deck felt far away, replaced by a raw industrial underbelly. Her gaze caught on a small dome fixed to the ceiling, a surveillance camera. Then another, red light blinking. She tried to ignore it, but the hair on her arms prickled. Who needed this much security on a party yacht? Damien opened a door on the left and gestured for her to step inside. The room was elegantly furnished but carried an unsettling sterility. The leather couch gleamed too perfectly, the floor spotless except for faint stains near the corner, dark blotches that looked like they had been scrubbed in a hurry. Elena lingered at the threshold. "What is this place?" "Just a private lounge," Damien said smoothly. "We don't show it to everyone. Only special guests." The word lingered in the air, heavy, suggestive. Elena stepped inside reluctantly, her eyes darting back toward the hallway. The door shut behind her with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. She ran her fingers nervously along the back of the couch, trying to steady her voice. "Your friends upstairs? They seem intense." Damien laughed lightly, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses from a crystal decanter. "Powerful people always do. They work hard. They play harder." He handed her a glass. "You'll get used to it." Elena took it but didn't drink. She noticed another camera in the corner of the ceiling, angled directly at the couch. The lens stared at her like an unblinking eye. Before she could speak, the door opened again. A man entered, tall and broad-shouldered, his face rough, scarred across one cheek. He glanced at Elena, then turned sharply to Damien. "We need to talk," the man said flatly. Damien's smile tightened. "Later." The man stepped closer, lowering his voice but not enough for Elena to miss. "She doesn't know, does she?" Elena froze. Damien's jaw clenched. "Not here." The man ignored him. His eyes flicked to Elena again, sharp, calculating. "You're playing too loose, Damien. This isn't the first time someone's noticed." "Enough!" Damien snapped, setting his glass down hard. The charm in his tone vanished, replaced by something sharp and commanding. "I'll handle it." The 2 men locked eyes, tension crackling between them like static. Elena sat rigid, her breath shallow, clutching her untouched drink. Finally, the scarred man gave a short, humorless laugh. "Fine. But remember, when things go wrong, it won't be on me." He turned and left, the door shutting behind him with a thud. Damien exhaled slowly, regaining his composure. When he turned back to Elena, the smile had returned, though it looked thinner now, forced. "Sorry about that. Business. Nothing for you to worry about." Elena forced a nod, though her heart was racing. Business? Whatever it was, it didn't sound like stocks or real estate. She glanced at the locked door across the hall as Damien poured himself another drink. A heavy chain ran through the latch, the metal scraped and worn as though used often. Behind it she swore she heard something, a faint muffled sound, like movement. "Elena!" Damien's voice drew her back, gentle but firm. He raised his glass again. "Relax. Tonight is supposed to be fun." She smiled weakly, lifting her own glass but not drinking. Her throat was too dry. The music from above drifted faintly through the floor, but down here the silence was louder, heavier. Elena sat back against the couch, her eyes on the camera in the corner, feeling its lens press against her like a warning. Something told her she shouldn't have followed him down here. But it was too late now. Elena sat stiffly on the couch, the glass heavy in her hand. Damien lowered himself beside her, too close, his knee brushing hers. The music above continued to pound faintly through the ceiling, a reminder that life and laughter still existed just a floor away, though it felt like another world. "You're tense," Damien murmured, his voice low, coaxing. "You don't need to be. You're safe here." Safe. The word rang hollow.
She forced a small smile as he reached over and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering against her cheek. It was gentle at first, almost tender, but there was something behind it, a hunger that unsettled her. He leaned in and kissed her. The first press of his lips was practiced, deliberate. Elena hesitated, but didn't pull away. Part of her reasoned that maybe this was what she'd come here for, a chance to feel wanted again. But the taste of liquor on his tongue was sharp, bitter, and his grip on her arm tightened just enough to make her flinch. "Damien," she began softly, but he silenced her with another kiss, firmer this time, his hand sliding down her side. At first she tried to go along with it. She told herself not to overthink, to let herself be swept up, to stop doubting every choice. But when his hand clamped suddenly against her thigh, hard, and he pushed her back against the couch, panic jolted through her chest. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. He didn't stop. His kisses grew rougher, his weight pressing against her. She tried to push him back, her palms against his chest. "Damien, I said wait." The smile he wore earlier had vanished. His face was darker now, eyes sharp, lips curled with something closer to irritation than desire. "Don't be difficult," he muttered, his breath hot against her ear. Fear surged in her throat. She pushed harder, but his hands were already gripping her wrists, pinning them above her head. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, the sound swallowed by the steady thump of music above. "Stop!" Elena's cry was muffled as Damien's mouth crashed against hers again, rough, crushing. Her pleas dissolved in the rhythm of the party overhead, her voice too small to matter here. She struggled, twisting beneath him, but his strength was immovable. The cameras in the corner blinked, capturing every second, their red lights steady, indifferent. Elena's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, but her body betrayed her, trembling, heavy with alcohol and fear. The once elegant room warped around her, the gleam of leather too slick, the faint stains on the floor too telling. How many times had this scene played out before? Damien's hands tore at her dress, fabric ripping in jagged bursts. His lips pressed against her neck, his teeth scraping until she whimpered. The violence of it snapped something inside her. "Please," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Don't do this." But her words only seemed to fuel him. His hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her breath, his eyes cold and detached, as though he were no longer seducing her, but proving ownership. The room spun. Her body ached beneath his weight. The sting of each violation blurred into flashes, the crush of his grip, the tearing of fabric, the silence of walls that held no mercy. Above them, laughter erupted, glasses clinked, a song changed. Life continued while Elena's world fractured. Time became unsteady. She didn't know if it lasted minutes or hours, only that seconds stretched into eternity. Her spirit dimmed under the weight of it, her body reduced to an object, her voice swallowed whole. When it ended, Damien rose without meeting her eyes. He adjusted his shirt, smoothed back his hair, and poured himself another drink as if nothing had happened. Eleanor lay broken on the couch, her dress torn, her mouth swollen and raw from his force. She tried to gather herself, to sit, to breathe, but the simple act of moving felt impossible. "You'll be fine," Damien said casually as though reading her thoughts. "It's better if you don't think too much about it." His words struck colder than his touch had. Better not to think, better not to feel. She pulled herself upright, trembling, clutching the shredded fabric around her. The cameras still blinked in the corner, their unblinking eyes ensuring her silence. Upstairs the party still roared on, blind to the horror hidden below. And Elena knew, whatever happened next, she was no longer the same woman who had stepped onto this yacht. The sea was quiet, almost mocking in its serenity. Waves lapped lazily against the yacht's sides, erasing the screams of the night before,
as though they had never happened. The sunlight poured over Elena's body like an unforgiving spotlight. She was sprawled on the deck, half-dressed, her hair matted with sweat and something darker. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The pounding in her head blurred reality into dream. But as her body ached, throbbing in places she couldn't bring herself to touch, the fragments of the night returned. A laugh, a hand pressing too hard, the sudden violence. Then nothing. She tried to sit up, but pain ripped through her mouth, sharp as glass. She touched her lips and felt the tear, the raw wound that made every breath sting. Lower, the agony was worse. She gasped, a strangled sound that barely carried above the waves. She's awake. The voice came from somewhere nearby. Heavy footsteps followed. Elena blinked until the shapes around her sharpened. Damien stood above her, his shirt unbuttoned, holding a glass of something amber. His smile was cold, stripped of the charm he had worn like a mask the night before. "You'll be fine," he said smoothly, though his eyes darted toward the others gathered in hushed discussion. "She's tougher than she looks." Elena's gaze slid to the small group of men at the stern. They weren't laughing anymore. Their faces were drawn, tense. One of them, the tall one with a scar across his cheek, hissed under his breath. "This is a problem, Damien. Look at her. She needs a hospital." Another shook his head. "A hospital means questions, reports, police." The scarred man spat over the railing. "So what then? Dump her overboard like trash?" Elena's chest tightened. Her voice cracked as she tried to speak. "But please, help me." The words were barely more than a whisper, her throat raw. Damien crouched down, close enough that she could smell the liquor on his breath. "Don't waste your energy. These men aren't your saviors." The woman from last night, the one who had warned her, suddenly emerged from below deck. She looked different now, stripped of the playful mask she had worn at the party. Her expression was hard, almost resigned. She knelt by Elena, ignoring Damien's glare, and brushed damp hair from her face. "They'll let you die before they let the world know what happens on this boat," she whispered, so soft only Elena could hear. Her hand lingered for a moment, trembling, before she pulled back. Elena wanted to cling to her, to beg her to stay, but the woman was already retreating, her eyes avoiding Elena's pleading stare. Damien straightened and addressed the group. "We control this. We say she passed out. Too much champagne, too much fun. No one questions it." Scarface shook his head violently. "She's torn apart, Damien. That's not champagne. That's not fun. Somebody went too far." The words twisted Eleanor's stomach. Somebody? As if it hadn't been Damien himself. Or perhaps, had it been more than him? Her memories blurred, overlapping faces, voices, hands. "Enough!" Damien snapped. "We dock tonight. By then this will all be handled." Eleanor lay there, trembling, tasting blood at the back of her throat. She realized in that moment that she wasn't just broken, she was trapped in their story now, a liability they were already planning to erase. Above, the sun climbed higher, turning the sea into blinding silver. To the outside world, it looked like a beautiful morning. But for Eleanor, it was the beginning of a darker descent. The deck shimmered with heat as the morning wore on, but the air had turned heavy, oppressive. The laughter and champagne glasses of the night before were gone. In their place, a tense silence thickened like smoke. Eleanor lay against a cushion Damien had tossed near her body aching, her throat raw. Every breath felt like a battle. Damien's voice cut through the silence. "No one speaks of this. Not a word." His tone was calm, almost casual, but there was an edge that made everyone flinch. "You all know the consequences." One of the men pulled out his phone, perhaps out of habit, perhaps intending to call for help. Damien moved faster than Elena expected. He snatched the device, hurled it across the deck, and it skidded into the sea with a splash. "Confiscate them all," he barked. Within minutes, the crew and guests were surrendering their phones, some hesitating, others too frightened to argue. The devices were piled in a basket, stripped of their lifelines, before Damien carried them below deck. Eleanor watched with half-closed eyes. Panic clawed at her chest. They were cutting off every chance she had to be found, to be saved. Scarface muttered, "This is madness, Damien. Someone's going to notice. Families, employers. People don't just vanish." Damien stepped back onto the deck, his shirt crisp now, as if he had changed to wash away the night's filth. "No one vanishes," he said coolly. "She drank too much, got sick, passed. Out! That's all anyone will hear." The woman who had warned Elena kept her gaze low, her lips pressed tight. The men nodded, though unease lingered. It was obedience born not from loyalty, but from fear. And then there was the boy. He couldn't have been more than 20, his uniform marking him as one of the deckhands. His hands shook as he tied rope unnecessarily along the railing, pretending to be busy. His eyes darted to Elena again and again, filled with something the others lacked. Remorse. When Damien's gaze was elsewhere, Elena let her lips part, whispering through the sting of her torn mouth. "Help me." The word was barely audible, but the boy's eyes widened. He froze, rope slipping from his fingers. Damien's head snapped toward him. "Something wrong, kid?" The boy swallowed hard, shaking his head. "No, sir. Just tired." "Then work faster." The boy nodded and bent to his task, but Elena saw the conflict burning in his expression. He knew. He wanted to do something, but fear kept him in chains. Damien poured himself another drink and paced slowly across the deck, his movements deliberate. "If anyone breathes a word of this, they'll answer to me. I don't care if it's to your wife, your boss, or your priest. Silence is survival." The woman finally spoke, her voice trembling. "And her?" She tilted her head slightly toward Eleanor. Damien's eyes flicked down to Eleanor's fragile form. He smirked. "She'll be fine, or she won't. Either way, no one will hear her side of the story." Elena closed her eyes, her heart pounding. The weight of his words pressed down on her like chains. Every instinct screamed that her survival depended on someone breaking ranks, someone brave enough to defy Damien. Her thoughts returned to the boy, the way he lingered, the way his hands trembled. He was the only flicker of light in this sea of shadows. If she had any chance, it rested it, and the courage of a stranger who had everything to lose. The waves slapped against the yacht's hull as if marking time. Elena lay still, conserving what little strength she had left, praying that when the moment came, the boy would choose her life over his fear. Above her, Damien raised his glass to the others, a toast to their silence. The afternoon sun dipped low, staining the sky with hues of orange and crimson. On the yacht, the mood had shifted from tension to a kind of brittle calm. The silence was more dangerous now, like the pause before a storm. Elena's body trembled with exhaustion. She could no longer tell whether she was drifting in and out of sleep or losing consciousness entirely. The salt from the sea breeze stung her torn lips, and every inhale burned through her chest. She heard the scrape of shoes on the deck, footsteps approaching with purpose. Damien's shadow fell over her. He knelt, tilting her chin upward, studying her like she was a broken possession. "You've lasted longer than I expected," he murmured, almost admiringly. Then his tone hardened. "But you're a liability now." The scarred man stepped closer, his jaw tight. "We can't keep her here, Damien. Someone will notice when we dock. You know what has to be done." Elena's eyes fluttered open, horror dawning as she realized what they meant. Her voice was hoarse, barely a thread of sound. "Please, don't."
Damien straightened, his decision already made. Do it. Two of the men lifted her under the arms, her body limp but still resisting with weak, jerking motions. The woman from earlier turned away, unable to watch. The young deckhand froze in place, his knuckles white around the rope he was coiling. His lips parted, but no words came out. Overboard, Damien ordered. Now! They dragged Eleanor to the yacht's edge. The sea below glistened, deceptively beautiful, its waves ready to swallow secrets. She felt the rough hands gripping her tighter, bruising her arms, and terror clawed through her chest. Wait! The sea boy blurted suddenly, stepping forward. She's alive! Damien's glare cut him down instantly. Do you want to join her? The boy faltered, his courage crumbling under the weight of Damien's threat. He stepped back, helpless, shame shadowing his face. Eleanor's heart sank. The world blurred as tears stung her eyes. She wanted to scream, to fight, but her strength betrayed her. The men counted softly. 1, 2, and on 3, they heaved her over the side. The plunge into the sea was brutal. Cold water swallowed her in an instant, shocking her body into a desperate jolt of awareness. Salt burned her torn mouth, and panic surged as she kicked weakly, her limbs heavy and sluggish. Above her, the yacht loomed for only a moment before drifting away, its lights fading into the horizon. She surfaced, gasping, coughing seawater. The waves slapped her face, dragging her under, pulling at her like greedy hands. Every time she broke the surface, she could see less of the yacht. She realized with hollow dread that they hadn't even looked back. Alone. Broken. Left to die. Her mind screamed at her to keep moving, to fight the pull of the ocean, but her body begged to give in, to sink into its dark embrace. The cold numbed her pain, blurring the edges of thought. Her legs stopped kicking, and the sea began to claim her. And then, light. A distant lantern swayed across the water. A small fishing boat bobbed not far away, its engines sputtering. The voice of an old fisherman carried faintly across the waves. What's that in the water? Strong hands reached down, rough with calluses and salt. Eleanor felt herself being lifted, hauled from the sea like a broken net. She collapsed onto the wooden boards of the boat, coughing violently, choking out water. God Almighty, the fisherman whispered, staring at her battered body. Who did this to you? Eleanor's lips moved, forming words that never came. The effort was too much. She fell against the boards, trembling, her eyes rolling back as exhaustion consumed her. But in the fading edges of consciousness, she felt it. The gentle rocking of the boat, the scent of diesel and fish, and the warmth of a blanket being draped over her shaking body. She wasn't dead. Not yet. The fisherman pressed 2 fingers to her neck, finding a pulse. Stay with me, Senora. You've survived the sea. Now you'll survive this. For the first time since stepping onto the yacht, Elena let herself believe in something fragile but real. Hope. As the boat turned toward shore, the vast ocean stretched behind them, hiding its secrets. But Elena's survival meant those secrets might not remain buried for long. The antiseptic smell of the hospital was the first thing Elena noticed when consciousness returned. The sharp sting of disinfectant cut through the haze of morphine, tethering her back to reality. Her body felt heavy, bandaged, but alive. Machines hummed softly at her bedside, their rhythmic beeps assuring her that, somehow, she had survived. She opened her eyes to a blur of white walls and fluorescent light. For a moment, panic surged. Where was she now? Another yacht? Another trap? But then she caught sight of the fisherman's cap, resting on a chair in the corner. Relief swept over her. He had kept his promise. She had been delivered to safety. Her throat was raw when she whispered, "Water." A nurse rushed forward, guiding a straw to her lips. The cool liquid burned, but it was the sweetest pain she had ever tasted. The nurse's eyes softened. You're safe now. Rest. But rest was impossible. Images of the night flooded her mind. Damien's smile twisting into cruelty, the locked doors, the suffocating grip of hands dragging her to the edge, the ocean, the betrayal. Later that afternoon, 2 detectives entered her room. Their suits looked out of place amid the sterile walls. One was greying, his expression weary but kind. The other was younger, sharper, his yes, burning with intensity. They introduced themselves quietly, careful not to startle her. "Elena Rivera?" the older one asked gently. She nodded, though every movement ached. "We need to know what happened," the younger detective pressed. His voice was urgent, almost desperate. "Who did this to you?" Elena's lips trembled. She hesitated, fear tightening her chest. Speaking his name felt like inviting death into the room. But silence would mean giving Damien the victory he craved. She forced the words out, broken and fragile. "Damien. His name is Damien." The younger detective leaned closer. "Damien who?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know his last name. He invited me to a yacht. There were others, men, and a woman. They hurt me. They threw me into the water. They thought I was dead." The room seemed to grow colder. The detectives exchanged a look, one of recognition. The older detective cleared his throat. "We've heard his name before. Damien is connected, wealthy, protected." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "You don't believe me?" The younger detective shook his head quickly. "I believe you. Every word. But you need to understand what this means. Going after him won't be easy. He has people in his pocket, judges, politicians, even some cops. If you accuse him, you'll be a target again." Terror surged in her chest. Even here, surrounded by nurses and machines, she wasn't safe. "Then what am I supposed to do?" The younger detective's jaw tightened. "You fight. With us. You survived what he did. That makes you dangerous to him, but it also makes you powerful. We'll protect you." The older detective shifted uncomfortably, doubt flickering across his face. "Careful, John. We've seen cases like this vanish before. Evidence disappears. Witnesses disappear." John, the younger detective, ignored him, his gaze locked on Elena's. "Not this time. Not her." For the first time since waking, Elena felt a glimmer of something other than fear, the possibility of justice. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Then I'll tell you everything, every detail I can remember." Her voice cracked as she recounted the nightmare. The champagne, the whispers of control, the locked doors, the assault, the woman's fleeting warning, the deckhand's fear, and finally the plunge into the sea. Tears slid down her cheeks as the memories poured out, but she forced herself to keep going. By the end, both detectives were silent. The older one rubbed his temples, muttering, "God help us!" John leaned forward, his expression fierce. "We'll make them pay, Elena. Damien doesn't get to walk away from this." As the nurse adjusted Eleanor's IV, she closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. But beneath the weariness was a new resolve. Damien thought she had drowned with his secrets, but she was still here. And now, she wasn't alone. Outside the hospital window, night settled over the city, cloaking it in shadow. The fight for truth was only beginning. The days after Elena's confession blurred into a storm of headlines and whispers. What should have been her path to justice became a battlefield she hadn't expected. It began subtly, a leaked hospital photo, her face bruised and swollen, plastered across tabloids with lurid captions. Middle-aged woman found adrift after wild yacht night. Then came the whispers of drugs
of alcohol, of desperation. The same strangers who had never met her now debated her sanity in online forums and morning talk shows. She was lonely. She wanted excitement. She probably made it up. The words stabbed deeper than the wounds on her body. Detective John stormed into her hospital room one morning, slamming a newspaper on the table. The headline screamed, "Attention-seeking widow invents yacht horror." He cursed under his breath. They're rewriting the story, Elena. Damien's people are everywhere, feeding lies, paying reporters, twisting the truth. Elena's hands trembled as she traced the letters. So now I'm the villain? John's gaze softened. That's exactly what he wants. If he can make you look unstable, your testimony won't matter. Beat. The older detective entered behind him, carrying a file. It's worse than that. Damien's lawyers are pushing the narrative that she seduced him, that she drank too much, lost control and fabricated the assault to cover her shame. He paused, his voice heavy. They're calling her unreliable. They've even dug up her past. Divorce, financial struggles. They're making her look like a woman desperate for attention. Elena's chest tightened. Shame, hot and suffocating, crawled over her skin. They'll believe him. Because he's powerful. Because I'm just... Her voice broke. Just me. John leaned closer, his eyes burning with determination. No, because you survived. And because you're brave enough to tell the truth when he wants silence. That's power too, Elena. But outside those walls, the world was less forgiving. Reporters camped outside the hospital, their cameras flashing like gunfire whenever she was wheeled to a specialist. One morning, a microphone shoved toward her face caught her flinch. The clip circulated instantly. Elena Rivera, fragile, unstable, refusing questions. In the quiet of her room, Eleanor stared at the ceiling, drowning in humiliation. She wanted to disappear, to sink back into the sea that had nearly taken her. But every time despair whispered, she remembered Damien's smirk, his cold words. She'll be fine. Or she won't. That memory hardened her. She refused to let him write the ending. The detectives arranged a private meeting with the district attorney. Elena, still weak, sat across from polished officials in tailored suits. The DA's expression was skeptical, his tone clipped. Miss Rivera, your story is troubling. But without physical evidence tying Damien directly, it becomes a matter of credibility. And, frankly, public perception doesn't favor you. John bristled. She nearly died. Her body is evidence enough. The DA raised a hand. And yet the defense will argue those injuries could come from anything. Falling, drunkenness, even self-harm. You know how this works. Damien's attorneys will shred her. Elena's voice wavered, but she forced herself to speak. So you'll let him walk free? After what he did to me? The DA's silence was answer enough. Back at the hospital, Elena broke down. Tears poured as she clutched the thin blanket, her sobs muffled against the sterile sheets. I can't fight him. I don't have the strength. John knelt beside her, gripping her hand. Then let me carry some of it. Let me fight with you. Something in his tone reached her. It wasn't pity. It was belief. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her chin. If I speak, they'll tear me apart. Then we make them listen anyway, John said. Your truth is louder than his lies if you don't give up. For the first time, Eleanor felt a spark of defiance. She was still broken, but not voiceless. Damien had power, yes, but he also had something to lose. She, on the other hand, had already lost almost everything. That gave her a freedom he would never understand. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. When she opened them again, her voice carried steel. Then we go after him, no matter what it takes. Outside her window, the city buzzed with rumors and doubt.
But Elena knew the real battle was just beginning. Truth against power, survivor against predator. And this time, she would not drown. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat. For weeks, whispers had built into a storm, and now Elena found herself at the center of it. Cameras flashed outside as she was escorted in, a fragile silhouette draped in quiet determination. Every lens seemed to dissect her, searching for cracks, doubts, weakness. She had told herself she was ready, but when she stepped through the heavy double doors, the weight of what lay ahead pressed her down like an iron shroud. The prosecution began with methodical precision, laying out the chain of evidence, photographs, medical reports, fragments of testimony. Yet Damien sat at the defense table with the composure of a man who believed himself untouchable. His suit was immaculate, his hair slicked back, his smirk faint but unmistakable. To the jury, he appeared powerful, controlled, even charming. Eleanor knew that charm had been a mask for violence, but proving it was another matter. The first crack in his armor came from an unexpected voice. The woman who had warned Elena on the yacht. Her name was Clarice, and she walked to the witness stand with trembling steps. For a moment she avoided Elena's eyes, but then she straightened her shoulders and spoke. Her testimony was a haunting echo of Elena's memories. The whispered warnings, the controlling behavior, the flashes of fear that had crept beneath the luxury veneer. The courtroom fell silent as she described Damien's temper and his treatment of women who crossed him. It was a small victory, but it planted a seed. Then came the deckhand. For days, Elena had wondered if he would stay silent, too afraid to risk his life. When his name was called, the defense smirked, expecting hesitation, but the young man entered the courtroom with pale skin and determined eyes. His voice shook at first, but each word gained strength as he recounted what he had seen: the locked doors, the bruises, Damien's threats to the crew. He admitted his fear, his guilt, the nights he couldn't sleep because he had done nothing. And when he looked at Elena and whispered, "I should have helped you," the courtroom air shifted. For the first time, the jury leaned forward, but the defense was relentless. Damien's lawyers carved into every testimony like surgeons wielding knives. They questioned Clarice's credibility, painting her as bitter and Gilles. Ours. They twisted the deckhand's hesitation into weakness, suggesting his words were born from guilt, not truth. And when Elena herself took the stand, the true cruelty of the trial began. The defense forced her to relive every moment. They asked why she hadn't screamed louder, why she hadn't fought harder, why she had ever stepped onto the yacht in the first place. Each question was laced with insinuation, that she had wanted the luxury, that she had stayed willingly, that her trauma was nothing more than regret. Elena's throat burned as she answered, her voice cracking yet steady. Every detail felt like a wound being torn open again, every courtroom gaze a reminder of her vulnerability. The jury listened, but their expressions were a blur. Eleanor could not tell if they believed her or saw her as the defense painted her. Unstable, reckless, a woman who had made poor choices and now sought someone to blame. When she stepped down from the stand, she felt hollowed out. But as she looked across the courtroom, her eyes caught the detectives. Officer Marlowe, the one who had believed her when no one else dared. His nod was small, almost imperceptible, but it steadied her. The trial stretched into days, then weeks. Each testimony was a shadow cutting deeper, each headline outside another reminder of public cruelty. Yet beneath it all, a current of truth pulsed stubbornly. Clarice's voice, the deckhand's confession, Eleanor's own refusal to be silenced. As closing arguments approached, the atmosphere grew charged, the air thick with anticipation. The jury would soon decide whether Damien's wealth could smother truth or whether Eleanor's fractured voice could pierce through. The trial was not just about justice anymore. It was about survival, dignity, and whether the shadows that haunted her would ever give way to light. And when the judge's gavel struck, signaling the beginning of deliberations, Eleanor realized the next chapter of her nightmare, or her deliverance, was about to begin. The jury filed back into the courtroom, their faces unreadable masks carved from execution. Eleanor gripped the edge of the wooden bench, her palms damp despite the chill that hung in the air. Weeks of testimony, hours of cross-examination, sleepless nights spent reliving the worst moments of her life. All of it balanced now on the thin edge of 12 strangers' decision. When the foreman rose, silence fell heavy. Every eye turned to the slip of paper he held. Eleanor's breath caught as the words were spoken. Guilty. The sound rang out like a bell, final and undeniable. For a moment the room erupted, reporters scribbling furiously, murmurs cascading across the crowd. Damien's composure cracked, his jaw tightening as he shot Elena a glare that promised revenge even from behind bars. The judge banged the gavel, restoring order, but Elena barely heard. All she could feel was the trembling of her own body, the sudden weight lifting, and the deeper weight settling in its place. Justice had been declared, yet it didn't feel like victory. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed, microphones thrust in her direction. Questions sliced through the air. How do you feel? Do you believe justice was truly served? What's next for you? Elena shielded her face, her voice hoarse as she whispered, I just want peace. But peace, she realized, was not easily won. The scars Damien left were not just etched on her body, but carved into her spirit. Every morning she woke to pain that reminded her of what had been taken. Every night, dreams pulled her back into the locked room, the music drowning out her pleas. Doctors told her healing would take time, that the body mends in layers. But what of trust? What of safety? Those were wounds medicine could not touch. In the weeks that followed, Damien's conviction became a public spectacle. Some praised her courage, others whispered doubts, repeating the defense's poisonous words. Online forums tore her apart, dissecting her choice, questioning her motives. She had fought to tell the truth, but the world still found ways to doubt her. That was the cruelest cut of all. Detective Marlowe visited once after the verdict. He stood awkwardly in her small apartment, hat in hand. You did something most couldn't, he told her softly. You faced him. You stood tall when he tried to break you. His words offered comfort, but Elena saw in his eyes the same helplessness she felt. Justice had been done on paper, but nothing could erase what had happened. One evening, Elena walked along the shoreline where the sea met the sky in shades of grey. The crash of waves mirrored the chaos within her. She thought of Clarice, who had risked everything to speak, of the deckhand, who had finally chosen truth over fear. Their courage had helped bring Damien down. But courage came with a cost, fear of retaliation, exile from circles of wealth and power. Even justice left ruins behind. She paused at the edge of the water, staring into the horizon. What was survival if it meant carrying ghosts forever? Yet, in her reflection on the tide, she saw not just the broken woman Damien had tried to erase, but someone still breathing, still standing. Perhaps that too was a form of victory. Justice had come, but it was jagged, incomplete. Damien was behind bars, yet his shadow lingered. Eleanor understood now that survival was not about forgetting, but about carrying the weight and learning to move despite it. As night descended, she whispered to the dark, I'm still here. The words were fragile, but they were hers. The story ended not with triumph, nor with defeat, but with a haunting truth. Justice could punish a monster, but it could never return what was stolen. Survival was both gift and burden, and Elena would spend her life learning the difference.